Oh, it's beautiful.
Hey there folks, welcome to another marvelous video, where we're gonna take you on a spacefaring adventure today. Science fiction and space travel are two topics that have always sparked the imagination of our species, ever since we were capable of conceiving ideas regarding them. If we were to marry the best of these two topics, what we would have in our hands is an absolutely legendary spacefaring saga, which is exactly what Star Wars is. Ever since its inception, this juggernaut of a sci-fi franchise has entertained and captivated fans of all generations, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. The Star Wars universe is one of the most lore-rich universes out there. However, most casual fans don't realize there's more to this storied franchise than just Jedi, Sith, lightsabers, and Master Yoda. The Star Wars universe feels very much lived in with characters and stories that tell us the stories of not just these beings with supernatural powers, but also of ordinary sentient beings who stood up against tyranny and injustice. With Season 2 of the TV series called Andor coming out soon, we thought this might be as good a time as any to cover some of the topics we feel might be relevant for you to better appreciate the series and the franchise as a whole. Andor serves as the prequel to the highly acclaimed Star Wars spin-off film called Rogue One, which in turn is a prequel to the earliest Star Wars films. It mainly follows the story of the former thief Cassian Andor, and sets the stage for the formation of the Rebel Alliance. We are, however, not here to talk about him today. In our video, we'll be talking about one of the most influential and powerful officers in the Galactic Empire's history, Orson Krennic. This power-hungry and ambitious human is responsible for more than one genocide in the series, having built the deadly planet-killing weapon, the Death Star. He's said to be the main villain of Andor Season 2, and as such, we thought it was only fitting that we covered everything we need to know about him. So strap on your lightsabers and get ready as we explore the life of one of the greatest and most underrated villains in Star Wars history. May the Force be with you. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Excellent news, Galen. The battle station is complete.
Krennic's early life and friendship with Galen Erso. Born in the year 51 BBY in Sci-Fifranchise City on the industrial planet of Lectural, little would his parents and the rest of the galaxy know of the horrors that Orson Krennic would unleash upon the galaxy in the days to come. At just the tender age of 15, he would be identified by the Galactic Republic as a promising youth, leading to his enrollment in the Republic Future program. This was a special training program and education system devised by the Republic to hone the skills of handpicked youths. The young men and women who are a part of this program were taught a variety of subjects, ranging from astronomy and architecture to energy generation and enhancement, just to name a few. He would attend this program in one of the institution's branches, in Brental 4. There, he would meet the man with whom his fate would be intertwined irrevocably, this man being Galen Erso. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he's the father of Jyn Erso from Rogue One. The two young men would build a strong friendship despite being polar opposites in character. Galen was a reclusive genius, while Orson was an extrovert extraordinaire. His nocturnal romps through the pleasure districts and unfettered revelry became the stuff of legends among the students in the Republic Future program. Despite this obvious difference in their nature, the two friends worked extremely well together, especially Krennic, who, to everyone's shock, passed each time with flying colors. After he graduated from the program, his superiors noticed that the young man had an immense talent for manipulating and reading others. Despite originally being listed as being excellent architecture, this led to him being offered a position with the Republic Corps of Engineers, which he gladly accepted. Now that he was part of the Engineers, he was put in charge of working on several important Republic constructions, both on land and in deep space. This, of course, resulted in his influence growing exponentially, which he used to help land a job for his old friend Galen as a professor at the Institute of Applied Sciences on Coruscant. Orson continues to make fast strides through the Republic hierarchy, and soon lands himself a seat in the Republic Strategic Advisory Cell. This was a committee tasked with overseeing the efforts against the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars. While he maintained his image as a member of the Corps of Engineers, in secret, he was part of what was called the Republican Special Weapons Group. This way, Orson managed to use his talent and charisma to place himself in a position of power at a young age, as the poster child of what the Republic looked for in its youth. Project Stardust begins. Not long after he became a member of the Republican Special Weapons Group, the Republic would get their hands on a superweapon, schematics, which would later become the infamous Death Star. However, there was a huge ongoing debate regarding the possibility of actually materializing this planet-killing weapon into reality due to a few factors. The battle station needed an immense amount of labor for its construction, and that posed a major logistical problem. The project was also supposed to be secret, and considering the manpower involved along with the scope of the structure that the Republic was trying to build, this would be impossible to achieve. The final issue was that they had no clue how to power the superweapon or the battle station itself, as none of the existing sources would be able to sustain it. This last issue would be the ticket to Project Stardust for Orson. He would meet the Vice Chair Master Yoda and make his chagrin at his friend Galen Erso's current work on kyber crystals as a new and alternative power source known. Erso had been imprisoned on the planet Valt, where he had been conducting his experiments by the Confederacy after they had overthrown the Valt government. Having convinced Amida that Erso's research could be weaponized, he gains permission to stage a rescue for the scientist while minimizing the appearance of Republican involvement in the incident. He would enlist the help of Hassobit, a Dresselian smuggler, to help him in this rescue mission. Krennic had previously captured some separatist scientists with the aid of smugglers. He used 2 of these individuals as bargaining chips to negotiate the freedom of Galen and his family. However, on their way out of the planet, they were intercepted by a warship, which forces Orson to call for Commander Praka's assistance. Prakas would arrive on the scene on a Republican cruiser and would fire upon the planet. The result would be that the group would escape capture once again, but the cruiser ended up destroying the keep, killing the remaining prisoners and guards, much to Erso's distaste. Orson would attempt to sway his old friend from his pacifist ways by taking him to Galen's home planet, Grange, which was locked in conflict. Despite watching his peaceful agrarian homeworld burn, consumed by the fires of war, Galen remains steadfast regarding his principles and refuses to use his research for warfare. Knowing full well that everything hinged on Galen's research, Krennic exercises immense patience by not attempting to coerce his friends into submission. Understanding that Galen needs to come over to his side willingly for the project to work, Krennic let the matter rest despite burning from within for the scientist's knowledge and expertise. He then goes on to meet the Geonosian Archduke, Poggle the Lesser, who was a prisoner of the Republic, to enlist his people's help in building the Death Star. Knowing full well that without their leader and nothing to keep them occupied, his people would soon fall back to their own ways of internal conflict, Poggle agrees to help the Republic with their project. In this way, Krennic solved the labor issue as well. However, this victory would be short-lived, when the Geonosian drones would rebel and destroy most of their work and kill the Republicans present at the site. Krennic would find out that Poggle had gone back on his word and betrayed him, severely hampering his reputation. In the meantime, he kept up his relentless effort to win over Galen to his side. His friend had been accused by many of their peers of sedition and had espionage charges levied on him for not helping the Republic more actively. Krennic would use his influence to have these charges dropped, hoping that Galen would be indebted to him and look at his cause more favorably. He would also offer Galen a position at the Helical Hypercom on Lokori, which was a deadbeat job in reality, at a place that was constantly under attack by the Separatists. Orson hoped that the mundane nature of the job, mixed with the attacks, would make Erso view the Separatists as villains, and he would accept his offer for a more fulfilling job. He further manipulated Galen by pretending to offer him a role in a project that claimed to be researching ways to bring power to worlds ravaged by the Clone War. Finally, finding a worthy cause, Galen would immerse himself in his new work, thinking he was doing some good while not knowing that his old friend had manipulated him. While Galen continued with his research, the Republic made efforts to weaponize his findings. This would lead to a massive disaster at a place called Malpaz, after the facility being used for this record exploded, causing massive casualties and a mass exodus from the planet. In order to cover this mistake, Orson pretends to be trying to maintain the secrecy of the project and suggests Mas Amida to promote him to Rear Admiral, so as to make it look like the project was moving along smoothly as anticipated. He is, however, not fully granted his wish, and given the rank of full commander. This incident once again highlights Orson Krennic's scary, manipulative nature, where he converts a disastrous situation that would surely hamper him into a positive by getting a promotion instead. Sensing that Galen's wife had begun suspecting his true motivations for helping her husband, he manages to convince her to take a break from her family for a bit to unwind. Having temporarily separated Galen from his wife, Krennic manages to manipulate his friend into believing that the people responsible for the carnage in Malpaz were the Separatists, who wanted nothing more than to destabilize the Republic, for which they would go to any length. Infuriated and saddened to see his work ruined by individuals who had no care for the well-being of others, Galen finally decides to join Project Stardust, promising to work even harder, keeping things secret from his wife. Eventually, though, Galen would find out that he had been deceived and would escape with the aid of Saw Gerrera, much to Krennic's chagrin. He would be demoted for this fiasco and would vow to find the Ersos no matter what. For now, though, he began to consolidate his own power and position to be able to achieve his goals, while at the same time working on the Death Star with what he had at his disposal. Following a series of political intrigues, Krennic would find himself in a very high-ranking post in the Imperial Intelligence. He would use his position and power to finally fulfill his vow to find the Ersos, locating them on a distant planet called Lamu. Having abducted the scientist and forced them into servitude, Project Stardust would finally be completed, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Unstable. One blast to any part of it will destroy the entire station.
Destruction of Jiha. After several trials and tribulations, Krennic was finally on the brink of glory. His genius was on the verge of being recognized, and all that he had worked for over the years was about to bear fruit. This was because Project Stardust had finally borne fruit, and the Death Star had been constructed. He was met by several high-ranking officials of the Republic, which had now been rechristened as the Empire following the end of the Clone Wars. Unfortunately, the Emperor and Darth Vader were absent from witnessing his moment of triumph, which caused Krennic to be greatly disappointed. However, Grand Moff Tarkin explained to Orson that their absence was a blessing in disguise, as failure in their presence would surely result in his demise. Krennic intended to blow away his disappointment, along with the desert moon of Jiha, and began moving the battle station into the moon's orbit. Orson intended to destroy the entire moon, in order to show that his weapon truly was what he had been making it out to be since day one. However, Tarkin would suggest a much milder option, suggesting that Orson destroy only Jedha City, to which the latter agrees begrudgingly. As the super laser locked onto Jedha City and fired, tens of thousands of lives were snuffed out in an instant as the city was wiped from existence. As the waves of radiation and aftershock rippled across the moon's surface, Krennic stood transfixed and in awe at his pièce de résistance. His moment of glory, however, would be snatched from his hand by Tarkin, who had secretly been plotting all this time to claim the Death Star as his work, letting Krennic take care of all the pitfalls until its completion. Incensed at what was happening, he lashed out at the Grand Moff, who simply rebukes him for all the defecting plots that had carried away Imperial secrets due to his negligence. This achievement that Orson Krennic had bought at the cost of betraying his own friend was snatched away in mere seconds, and somebody had to pay. Confrontation with Galen Erso on Iadu. Humiliated and incensed at having his life's work stolen from him by Tarkin, Krennic rushed to the stormy planet of Iadu. This was where Galen and his team of scientists had been working on the research regarding the Death Star and the super laser. Determined to find the individual who had collaborated with the rebels, Krennic arranges for a meeting with Galen and the rest of the scientists. After lining up the researchers on an open platform, Orson announced that he was privy to the fact that one of them had aided the rebels and leaked key information. He asked the rebel collaborator to step up and face judgment. However, when no one responded to his commands, he states that it must have been a group effort and then readies the firing squad to kill everyone. Cornered and hoping to save the lives of his colleagues, Erso steps up and confesses to the allegations, but Krennic executes his team regardless. He then knocks Galen to the ground, taking pleasure in telling his former friend that the test run for his superweapon had been successful, as Jedha City had been wiped from existence. Suddenly, their position comes under attack by numerous Rebel T-65B X-Wing fighters, who feared the worst had happened to their ground team after there was a communication blackout between them and Andor. In the ensuing confusion and fight, Galen is killed by the Alliance's Blue Squadron. Krennic, in the meantime, manages to barely flee the scene, but not before noticing Galen's daughter arriving. Galen Erso breathes his last in the arms of his daughter. Even though he and his fellow scientists had all been killed that day, his knowledge would prove invaluable later in the destruction of the Death Star. As for Krennic, not only did he have the Death Star stolen from him, but the events at Iadu would also have deep ramifications, not only for the Empire's future, but also for his own.
Operations Director.
Vader's warning on Mustafar. Still stinging from the humiliation Tarkin inflicted upon him, Krennic had far from given up hope about acquiring command over the Death Star. He knew that the only way he could achieve this was by supplanting Tarkin, by making him lose favor with Vader and the Emperor. There was nothing he could do to Tarkin with his level of influence and power, so he bid his time. He would one day be summoned by Darth Vader himself to the Sith Lord's personal fortress on the planet Mustafar. Viewing this as an opportunity to manipulate his way once more to gain an audience with Palpatine, Krennic arrives to meet Vader. He's ushered into the presence of Vader, who, while gazing into the volcanic landscape of the planet, begins chastising the director. Vader tells Krennic that despite its completion after pouring immeasurable resources of the Empire into it, the Death Star had begun to prove much more of a hassle than an asset. He berates Krennic on his inability to keep the battle station a secret from the galaxy, citing the fact that rumors had begun to spread amongst the upper echelons of the Empire regarding the destruction of Jedha City and the attack on Iadu by the rebels. Vader tells Krennic that if the Senate were to gain knowledge about this weapon, there was a huge possibility that it might spark an outrage, causing them to defect to the Rebel Alliance. Krennic had therefore been found severely lacking in secrecy, too eager to show off his prized creation. Krennic, however, tries to shift the blame for Jedha on Tarkin, and beseeches Vader to ask the Emperor for an audience, so that he might show Palpatine firsthand what a great weapon he'd created for the Emperor. His words, however, are simply ignored by Vader, who was fixated on the Death Star remaining a secret from both the rebels and the rest of the galaxy. He tells Krennic not to rest until he can assure the Emperor that the knowledge regarding the battle station had not been compromised by Galen Erso. As the Sith Lord was leaving the chamber, having given a piece of his mind to Krennic, The director pleads once again with Vader to grant him command of the Death Star, in hopes of remaining in charge of the battle station. However, Vader's patience had run dry by now, and he turns and performs the iconic Force choke on the ambitious Krennic. He stops just short of choking the life out of Orson, wanting the man to temper his ambition, lest it result in his downfall. As Krennic lay choking on the floor, his hatred for Tarkin would burn even stronger, as he refused to accept his defeat. Battle of Scarif and Krennic's death. After his encounter with Vader on Mustafar, Krennic began redoubling his efforts to make it look like he was following Vader's directive while finding ways to overthrow Tarkin. During his efforts to ensure that the Death Star remained a secret, Krennic would discover that a complete technical readout of the battle station was available on the tropical planet of Scarif in an Imperial base. He would arrive at the planet to secure these plans, as the rebels could easily target the planet in search of it. However, upon arriving at Scarif, he would find that the facility was being operated in the most complacent fashion possible. The man in charge of the facility, General Satoris Ramda, and his men had grown extremely lazy and reliant on the automated defense system that was in place. Just as Orson had ordered for all of Urso's dispatches to be called up for inspection, an eruption occurs on the planet's horizon. The director's fears were realized as the rebels somehow gained knowledge regarding the importance of the knowledge held within this facility. A fleet of rebel ships had begun to amass outside the shield gates of Scarif, and a fight was imminent. In the chaos and confusion, Krennic was informed that the data vaults had been breached by rebel forces. Realizing the rebel fleet's attack was merely to serve as the distraction for the infiltrators to gain access to Urso's knowledge, Krennic rushes toward the vault and discovers Andor and Jyn Urso, Galen's daughter, in the process of stealing the secret data. As a fight ensues, he manages to severely wound Andor, and leaving him for dead, continues to pursue Jyn. When he finally catches up to her, Krennic discovers that Jyn is attempting to transmit the data to the rebel fleet. Sneering at her for her vain attempt, as the shields would prevent any such transmission from taking place, he points his gun at her, but is shot from behind by Andor, who's very much alive. Taking advantage of this situation, Jyn manages to send the data through to the rebels. With Krennic incapacitated, the two leave him, just as the director witnesses the Death Star appear in Scarif's sky from hyperspace. Tarkin had arrived too late to prevent the events that had just transpired from taking place. In a final attempt to stop the rebels from getting their hands on Galen's knowledge, he prepares to fire the superweapon at the Imperial base. As Krennic watches the Death Star looming over him, he barely has time to comprehend the irony of being killed by the very weapon he devised, when his location is hit by a blast from the battle station, completely obliterating him along with the Imperial facility and everyone else in and around miles of the vicinity. What was Orson Krennic's legacy? Depending on who you ask, Orson Krennic's legacy might differ slightly. For those who are privy to his role in the creation of the Death Star, Orson is a butcher responsible for the death of thousands of individuals. Although he might not have been directly responsible for the destruction of Alderaan, where the full force of the Death Star would be unleashed, it doesn't abate him from the guilt of helping build the machine responsible for the act. All those souls, both Imperial and Separatist, that were consumed in the destruction of Jedha, Malpaz, and Scarif, were part of his bloody legacy. Not long after his death at the hands of his own creation, Galen Erso's secret weapon would be transmitted to Princess Leia Organa. Following this, the veil of secrecy was dropped by the Empire as Tarkin dissolved the Senate and announced that the Imperials would govern the galaxy through the fear of the Death Star's capabilities. To demonstrate his intent, Tarkin would unleash the full might of the weapon on Leia's homeworld, Alderaan, completely destroying the planet. However, in the subsequent battle, Luke Skywalker fires a pair of proton torpedoes into the single thermal exhaust port that fed into the station's main reactor, destroying the Death Star completely. Galen's ultimate act of revenge and defiance would come to pass against his old friend, just as he had envisioned it, despite both of them being dead by this time. We might get a more accurate representation of Krennic's legacy from the eyes of Tarkin, who believed that the director would only be a footnote in the Empire's history. Tarkin was convinced that despite the weapon's brilliant testing on Jedha City, Krennic would be remembered as the incompetent director who caused a mining disaster. The Grand Moff would not be far off, as the rebel files that were recovered by the Resistance gave very little credit to Krennic in the development of Imperial weapons, and the Death Star, despite the significant role he had played in their creation. Leia noted that this would have greatly annoyed the ambitious and power-hungry Orson, and was glad for it. In fact, the Death Star was referred to by many as Tarkin's folly and not Krennic's, despite the latter having played a much larger role in its creation. For a man who betrayed all bonds of humanity and friendship to pursue his ambitions, ironically, he remained largely obscure in the larger history of the galaxy. We believe that having his legacy relegated to the recesses of galactic history is a fate much worse than death for this megalomaniac.
So, we're in position, ready? Fire!
What kind of person was Krennic? Krennic was a sociopath, who used his charm and charisma to manipulate individuals to rise in power and station from his formative years, all the way into his adulthood. He showed no signs of remorse or regret in committing heinous acts like genocide or murdering his best friend's wife. After the destruction of Jedis City, he was more concerned about losing his position at the Death Star than the millions of lives he had just snuffed out. Krennic shows that he holds no value over bonds of love and friendship, betraying his only friend from their younger days without a second thought. He was a ruthless, power-hungry warmonger who would do anything to increase his own influence. Such was his craving for these things that it overcame his fear of Vader momentarily, leading him to ask the Sith Lord to make a request on his behalf. Even after getting force-choked for this audacity, Krennic was not deterred. In all this madness, one could perhaps admire his resolve and determination, but that's where anything positive about his character ends. Beneath the veneer of his self-assured and sneering self lay a man who was prone to lashing out in anger when things didn't go his way. Krennic was a self-serving, egotistical megalomaniac who viewed other people as a mere means to an end. While he didn't believe in the Force, he certainly was as evil as they came, despite not being a practitioner of the dark side of the Force.
Let's start somewhere.
Who played Orson Krennic in Star Wars? The role of Orson Krennic is played by the acclaimed actor Ben Mendelsohn in the Rogue One movie. He plays the role to perfection, making the audience deeply loathe him every time he makes an appearance on the screen. Mendelsohn had asked the director of the film whether he was required to put on a posh British accent for the role. Gareth Edwards, the director of the film, responded that he didn't have to, as it made it seem like every time there was a job vacancy in the Empire, they went and picked up candidates from the Royal Shakespeare Company. The fact that Mendelsohn's portrayal of the character exudes a much more grounded and working-class energy makes Orson Krennic even more sinister to the audience. Despite Mendelsohn denying the fact that he would not be making an appearance in the second season of Andor initially, it has been confirmed that he is set to reprise his iconic role in the galaxy far, far away.
What a swell party this is.
Andor's Krennic is different from Rogue One. Actor Ben Mendelsohn has revealed that the Krennic we will be seeing in the Andor series will be slightly different from Rogue One. This is to be expected, as we'll be seeing Orson growing into the person we came across in the film, and Andor is a prequel to the movie. According to Mendelsohn, he relished exploring various new facets of the villain's character. Judging by his words, we will most likely get a much more fleshed-out Krennic as a character. Set in the years leading up to him becoming head of Project Stardust, it will be interesting to see how Mendelsohn has approached this character after a prolonged break from the franchise. The actor said he had a lot of fun playing and portraying the different shades of Krennic's character, so let's just hope we have as much fun watching it as well. Marvelous verdict. Orson Krennic is set to become the latest returning face in Andor Season 2. Thanks to Mendelsohn's stellar portrayal of the character in Rogue One, this is one of the most highly anticipated returns. Originally, Krennic was created to be part of an unnamed live-action Star Wars series, which never came into fruition before the character was transferred to be the antagonist for the 2016 film Star Wars Rogue One. It is, therefore, only fitting that he's now making his debut on the small screen. His character is set to form a rivalry with the series villain, Dedra Meero, played by the talented Denise Gough. Krennic is the perfect example. While the Sith were responsible for creating the Empire, men like him kept it running. Krennic's character traits make us believe that if he were Force-sensitive, he would indeed be fairly powerful in the dark side. The plotting and scheming, along with the manipulative strategies he engaged in, would make his Sith overlords proud. Be sure to catch Andor Season 2 on Disney+, and make sure to watch us as well for more Star Wars-related content. Thank you for sticking with us right to the end of the video. You can find content regarding all of your favorite shows, movies, and characters on our channel. So if you like this, do check out the rest of our channel. For now though, it's time for us to say goodbye. We hope to see you again soon, in a galaxy far, far away. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.